Hello and welcome to another LeetCode problem. Today we're going to be doing day 2 of the JavaScript 30-day challenge. And I actually did the day 3 problem earlier. I think it was like a few days ago, and I have that up, the counter too. I'll rename it just to let people know it's day 3. But we're going to do this one. And so for this problem, it's a pretty straightforward problem once again, but we're just going to focus on concepts. So given an integer n, return a counter function. The counter function initially returns n, and then returns one more than the previous value every time it's called. And so they give this example where n equals 10, and you want to return 10, and you want to return one more than the previous time every time. So what you have to know for this is when you return this function, this inner function, I think I talked about this before, so this inner function actually has access to every single argument that's passed into the function that made it, and then all of the variables that are made. Like if you make some variables here, you know, if you do like whatever, it'll have access to those. And so this is kind of similar to a constructor where you can think of these variables as like class variables of this. Let's say this was like an object. And in JavaScript, functions are both functions and objects. That's pretty much what happens under the hood, is actually this variable gets saved in the closure of this function right here. Okay, and so what's going to happen, like if we just return n, let's say, and we can even print it just to show you. N. So then we can use this code here. So we can have a constant counter equals create counter 10, and then we can print it. So if we print it a bunch and we run it, you can see that it keeps printing n. Also, another thing, they used var. You typically don't want to use var. You want to use const or let. So because we're not going to reassign create counter to anything else, we can just use const. So const means you're not going to reassign the value. Let is if you are going to reassign the value. So you could see like when we do this const counter create counter 10, what it's actually doing is it's saying, okay, well, counter is create counter, and create counter returns a function, and so const counter really equals this function here, and this function has access to this 10 because it was passed into the above function. And so there's a couple ways you could do this. So you could just say like a straightforward way would just have an n plus 1, right? And then you return n. Actually, so they want to say the first time return n and return one more afterwards. So what you could actually say is you could say like n minus minus, and then you could just do a n plus plus here, right? And so what that would happen with this is it would be a 9 here, and then the first time you call it, it would get updated to a 10, and then 11 and 12 and so on. So this should work, right? And so that's one way to do it. I can get rid of these now, I think, now that I demonstrated that. I'll comment them out. We might need them for later. Okay. So yeah, you can see that like this does work, and it does print. We will leave the print as well. And so yeah, pretty much what it'll do is when you make the function, it'll make n go down 1, and then every time you call it, it'll go up 1, which will essentially make n start with the same value that it was passed in before. Okay. So now let's look at some tricks. So one trick you can do is you can use a prefix or postfix operator. So if we did something like this, let's think about what this would do. So this prefix operator would actually add 1 to n and then return the value. And so this could work. However, you would need this code. You would need this code because then what would happen is n would go down to 9 when we first make it. Now n would get updated to 10 and then return 10. Then n would get updated to 11 and return 11. It would get updated first and then return. So this should pass as well. Yeah, and so that will pass as well. And the other thing you can do is we can do a postfix operator. And so what a postfix operator does is it will return the end value and then update it. And so what's going to happen is now we don't need this, and let's see what happens if we do have it. Like, let's see. So this can show us. Okay, so our code is actually these 3 values, this 9, 10, 11. And then their code is this thing right here. Okay, So what happens is n starts at 10, it gets decremented down to 9, and then we're saying let's update the value, or let's return the value, then update it, right? So we're saying like return 9, then update it to a 10. Return 10, then update it to 11. Return 11, then update it to 12. And that's fine. Like that is kind of what we want. But you have to realize that what we would want is we want to return we want to return 10 first. So if we do it this way, if we get rid of this minus, now what's going to happen is n is going to be 10, and we're going to return 10, then update it to 11. Then we're going to return 11, then update it. Then we're going to return 12, then update it. And that is the functionality we want. So now we have what we wanted. And so that's the difference between the prefix and the postfix, where, yeah, this exact same code for the prefix updates first, then returns, and the postfix returns first. So hopefully that makes sense to you. Now, let's leave it like this. Now, what else can we do here? Well, we can do some other things. So we can't actually make a function and then return it. So we can do something like, we can have a name, right? So we can have function like dog or something. And then we can return dog. I think that'll work. Yeah. So you could do it that way, or you could do the anonymous function without a name. Now, another thing we can do is we can have an arrow function. And so the difference between an arrow function is we can just have a return straight away as well. And so an arrow function has these parentheses for the input, just like a normal function, but now it has an arrow instead of being called function. An arrow just means like do this code after you've taken the input parameters. So that should work. Now, what else can we do? Well, so we don't need this console log anymore, or at least for now. So let's actually just comment that out. And the other thing we can do is we can write it on one line. And so if you write on one line, I actually need to get rid of this console log for now. So the other thing we can do is because we wrote this on one line, we don't actually need the brackets because it's on one line, and we don't need the return statement. And so this will work as well, where we just say, let's return a function that increments n with a postfix incrementer. And so that'll work. Now, another thing we can do is we can recognize that this function can actually be also written as an arrow function. So we could say something like this, where this is just an arrow function. And not sure. Let's see. N is not defined. Oh, right. We need to pass an n. Okay. So that works. And now finally, what we can do is we can actually write them both as an arrow function. So we could do something like this, which would be like the shortest way of doing it. And so let's think about what this is saying, right? So we're saying const create counter is a function that takes a input n and returns. So the thing to the left of there is what it takes, and the thing to the right is what it returns. So it returns a function that takes no input and increments n and then returns it, and that's what we want, right? So do something like that as well, and this will pass as well. And as far as runtimes, I'm not super, like, if someone wants to write in the comments like what's better for runtime, I'm not entirely sure, and I don't think like this could just be based on the way the LeetCode tests are made. I'm not entirely sure on that, but if someone wants to like write like what's better for runtime and things like that, that'd be good. Usually, I believe that JavaScript is not a language you really want to use if you're super concerned about runtime. You'd rather use things like C++ for that. But I mean, definitely, if you could write things in a faster way. I do know that like both of these are used in practice, like either function notation or arrow notation. Some people prefer arrow, some people prefer function. And then as far as like, is postfix good to use versus just having like n plus equals 1, or you know, whatever. I'm pretty sure people do use like postfix and prefix addition. Like, I don't think that's like bad or anything. Okay, but I think that's it for the things I wanted to cover in this video. So if you did like the video, then please like it, and subscribe to the channel, and I will make another one tomorrow for this JavaScript challenge. I'll see you in the next one.